Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining this Brownbag on Playwright versus Cypress. Let's first go over the content that we'll be going over today. So first, we have a brief introduction, introducing who we are, and a description of how long we've worked with these tools. Then we'll compare these tools. What are the similarities? What can they do? Then we will dive deeper into the differences between the tools. What are their advantages and disadvantages? We also each have a demo for you guys to show you how the tools work. And finally, we'll also have a conclusion. So first, who am I? Yeah, Christian, it says it on the top. I've been with Brightest for almost 5 years. I've been actively doing test automation since about 2015. Some of the tools I've worked with, which are probably familiar to you guys, are Selenium, Appium, WebDriver IO, Cypress, 𝗕𝗿𝗀, and of course, Playwright. Playwright specifically, I've been using for around 2 years now. Multiple smaller projects, as well as the current longer running project I'm currently on. A little bit about Playwright. It was developed by Microsoft, released in 2020. It's designed to be fast, user-friendly, out of the box supporting parallel test runs, and it supports multiple browsers and languages. This support for multiple browsers and multiple browser sessions makes it an ideal tool for both UI test and end-to-end testing. It has its own browser executables that it installs when you install the tool, with which it communicates with the browser through the WebSocket. This means no hassle with managing drivers like you would have with Selenium.
Yes, hello, I'm Leo. I've been with Brightest for about 5 years now. I started in 2020, first with manual testing and a bit of project management. Then I transitioned to test automation. I've been using Cypress for about 2 years now. Before that, I was using Selenium and a bit of 𝗕𝗿𝗀𝗀. A bit of Cypress itself, it has been developed in 2014 by an actual company, Cypress.io. The main goal for the development of this tool was to make it more faster, user-friendly, and stable for front-end developers to make good tests. It's used for testing everything that runs inside the browser itself. And as with Playwright, it doesn't need external drivers, and it will be installed with the tool itself. So the similarities between Cypress and Playwright is they are both for web automation, of course. It's for controlling the browser, so everything inside the browser can be controlled. Like I said before, it eliminates the need for for Selenium for a driver management, because it's installed with both of those tools. Both tools are actually quite quick to install and come pre-packaged with different stuff. Like, for example, they both can do snapshots or videos right out of the box, so you can immediately start with the testing. These tools have been developed because those are a newer generation, and it's like it says in the PowerPoint, it's because they have learned lessons from the previous tools, and they brought it into these two tools. Let me start with talking about the advantages of Cypress itself. Like I said, Cypress is very easy to install. It's very beginner friendly. So once installed, you can almost immediately start with the testing. It has a well-organized UI, so it's very clear what it does, and I will show it in the demo later. Cypress has built-in commands, so it's very easy to put in standard commands to use, but you can also implement your own commands, which can be used inside the framework. It's very stable for the typical UI tests. So you will see that the biggest advantages of Cypress is a strong visual test runner. So with each step, you can have a screenshot, so you can go back in time to see what each step does. So I will show this in the demo later on as well. Like I said before, it's mainly focused as pure end-to-end testing in the browser. But if you need some more things like implemented with CI/CD, you can use Cypress Cloud for that. It's, yeah, like the PowerPoint says, is ideal for teams that want to set up very quickly and very clear.
Playwright is, of course, not without its own advantages. One that may be important is all the features in Playwright are free, as opposed to some of those in Cypress. It has a built-in tool called CodeGen, which I will also demo later, which can be used to very easily and quickly get your selectors for your web elements. Out of the box, it supports parallel testing. It's actually made with the intention to do as much parallel testing as possible. It's noted to have a very fast execution time. It also supports, to some degree, mobile emulation as well. So you're not just stuck on browser testing for desktops or laptops. It gives you more control over test isolation compared to Cypress, because Cypress closes your context automatically between tests. With Playwright, the user is supposed to implement that or manage that themselves. So you could look at that as more work, but actually it also gives you more control over keeping or closing context. And it has a very active community, which translates itself to also having extensive documentation. So if you ever get stuck with something in Playwright, no doubt you will find something about it online.
That's quite a big list of advantages for Playwright, but isn't it true that Playwright has a steep learning curve compared to other tools like Cypress?
Yeah, sure, but you know what also has a steep learning curve? Learning to drive a Formula One car. But once you master it, that's one hell of a car. But yeah, joking aside, you can counteract this with a proper onboarding process and sticking to the best practices.
Okay. But wouldn't you also agree that there's a slower visual feedback with Playwright?
It's true. There's a bit of a delay, especially when you use the UI to look at the test execution live. But it is also best practice to keep your tests as short as possible. So with that in mind, even if there's a delay, it's going to be insignificant.
Yeah. Like Cypress, we use commands. Isn't that in Playwright much harder to remember or less intuitive use of than Cypress?
Playwright doesn't come out of the box with this command system that Cypress has, but nothing's preventing you from implementing a similar system to your needs using utility classes, for example.
Okay. Isn't Playwright also a bit more complex to set up when you have a non-standard workflow?
Sure, that's true, but that's true for any tool, any framework. Eventually, you run into this problem. So you'll have to tackle it anyway. Just implement it yourself, build it up the way you need it, suit it for your project, instead of just sticking within the limitations or apparent limitations of the tool itself. You can expand it a lot.
Okay. Like you said before, Playwright is a younger tool than Cypress. Doesn't it have a much smaller community when you need to look something up?
Yeah, it's smaller, but as noted earlier, Cypress is a newer tool, a younger tool. It has less years to build a community, but because it's a newer tool, that also means it has a very active community. So despite being smaller, it's very active.
Okay.
Now we get to the good stuff, the disadvantages of Cypress. All of the features I said for Playwright, they're free. That's not true for Cypress. If you want to use parallel testing, for example, you're going to have to pay for it. So what about the money?
Yes, that is in fact true. Some parts of Cypress are required for a paid plan. However, for the most standard projects, the free version is more than enough. And if you truly need those paid features, but you don't want to pay for it, you can implement it yourself inside the framework, but it will take a bit more time to implement them yourself than to actually pay for it and use it.
All right, well, assuming you're a rich man and you can pay for everything, something you can't pay for, even if you have the money, is the lacking support for Safari or WebKit.
Yes, that's also true. Cypress doesn't support Safari, but however, the best practice is actually to run the automation tool in the most stable environment. And it's also really required to test the application itself and not the browser. So if we run the application on the test on the application, then we can do some small checks on the Safari browser manual.
Okay, going back to one of those features that you could pay for is the parallel testing. Yes. Even if you get that feature unlocked, it's still going to cause more issues, isn't it?
It's not going to cause more issues, but you have to pay for it. But it's going to be a bit more difficult. What I mean with that is, if you want to have it without paying for it, you will have to implement it yourself, and that will take time, as mentioned before.
All right. When I'm writing scripts for Playwright, I'm usually working with multiple tabs. In Cypress, you're stuck in one tab, no?
Yes, Cypress does not support the multiple tabs. This limitation should be factored in when you are setting up your project or designing your test, because if that's a requirement, then Cypress is not the way to go.
Another limitation of Cypress is comparing to Playwright, which has mobile emulation, so there's some support towards mobile. With Cypress, you're stuck in the web domain. Yes,
it's a bit the same thing as the multiple tabs. You need to factor this in on the start of the project. So if this is truly a requirement, then Cypress is not the right tool for you.
Okay, also noticed Cypress doesn't support all the keys. May look nitpicky, but what if your project really needs those keys?
Yes, the most keys are implemented standard, but however, if you want to have a special key character that you want to use, you can set them up as a command and then use it with that. Okay, then one last but not least issue I have with Cypress, there's no await functionality. No, that is true. Cypress does not support await by default, but it has a retry mechanism. So if there's an element that fails or something that it can't find, it will automatically retry it and check for if it can try another time, and if not, then it will fail. So, okay, 𝗕𝗵𝗀, looks like you have an answer for everything. So how about we put it to the test? Yeah, I'll show my screen and we'll show the demo. There we go. Hopefully you guys can see my screen at the moment. Yes. Okay, so once you install Cypress, you get different folders. I have set it up like this at the moment. Like for the data, we can use inside the test. So the test will change profile pictures, etc. So these are the images that it can use. If required to download something from your test, it will come inside the downloads folder here. We have a folder that's called end-to-end, which will show here are mainly the tests written. You can add folders, you can set it up in a workflow that suits you. But yeah, the tests are here. And as we can see here, I'll show we have 𝗧. So each command starts with 𝗧 like this. And validate page heading is, for example, a command that can be used. Let me show you inside the commands. Here are all the commands that we have added. The one I was talking about, validate heading page. You can put your code in here, what it needs to do when you call up this piece of code. So yeah, these are the commands. Then we have a fixtures folder. That's how we use it. It will contain some details about what we can use inside the tests. For example, some text that we need to fill in, date of birth, some examples. Then we have the page objects, of course, which will include all the elements that we use inside the tests. We currently have those, you can use CSS selectors or XPods in this. So that's about it. We also have screenshots. So when there's a test that fails, when you run it headless, you will see screenshots that is added in here. Let me go ahead and run the test. It's very easy to run the test with an npx Cypress open. So you will see this screen, which will open up Cypress, and we will head over to end-to-end testing. We will select the browser. So this is quite a visual layout of Cypress. Once you run the tests, you will see very clearly each step what it's trying to do. So now it's trying to visit the website itself. The internet is a bit slow here. There we go. It will log in and do the test itself. You can see each step that it's trying to do. One of those advantages I was telling about is that once the tests are finished, you can go back in time and see what each step does. So when a test fails, you can easily see a screenshot or the step that has failed. So like I said, once I hover over each step, you can see that what it is trying to do. Then, of course, this is not the only way to run Cypress. We can also run it through headless or in the cloud. Let me open up the cloud. So you will see here, this is the cloud. It's quite similar visual as shown before, where you can see the tests that has run, if these are passed, or I also have run one that has failed. So you will see here a test, for example, to adding the language that has failed. You can see exactly the step where it has failed, and you will also see a screenshot of the page itself. So that's a quick demo on my part for Cypress. I hope let me show Playwright.
All right. I'm sure I can more than match your demo. Let me share my screen. So if all is well, you should be seeing Visual Studio Code. I try to stick as much as possible to Playwright out of the box, but I did add some basic structure, like page objects, for example, because How can you do it without? Right now, you're looking at multiple test cases. One test case is registering a new user on the CV tool. Second test case is logging in using that user and adding a project to the user. And a third test case is logging in and adding a certificate for that user. So on top here, there's just some test data that I'll be working with. Then here we have the first step, registering our user. As you can see, we're referencing page objects here. I like to store them into a collection, so all my page objects are readily available per website that I'm testing. So this one, I just called it CV pages. Here's a second test, login and add a project. And down here, the third test, login and add a certificate. Why am I always doing this login for each step? That has to do with countering test dependence. So imagine if the first login would fail, and then I'm trying to add the project, and then the next test is just trying to add a certificate without logging in, then that test would fail as well, even though adding the certificate, which is the actual scope of the test, didn't really fail. It was working maybe. And then on the left here, I have the structure of the framework. So I have a basic page object from which all other page objects can inherit. And this is an example of one of the base objects for the CV tool. As you can see, we have some different selectors here. So we have get by role, get by name, get by text. But we still have this locator here available for which we can use for CSS selectors, expat, for example, if we just don't have a get by role or a get by test ID that works. Maybe I'll just run these tests. So Playwright also has a UI to follow the test live, or you can run it headless. I'm gonna run it with the UI for this demo. As you can see here on the left is an overview of all the tests we want to run. On the top here, you can select the browsers you want to run it for. So in this framework, I enabled Firefox and Chrome. I'm going to enable Firefox as well, just to show the parallel nature of Playwright. I have to say this is going to fail, one of the register new user tests, but that's just expected because by running it in parallel here with the same test data, I'm going to try to register the exact same user for the same email. So whichever one is faster is going to pass, and the one that's slower is going to fail. So you can see a spinning icon of the tests that are running. So Chrome and Firefox are running at the same time right now. One of these should fail. Otherwise, something magic happened. All right, looks like Firefox won the race. On top here, you can also follow what was shown in the UI at each step. So this is where there's a bit of a delay compared to Cypress, but at the end of the test, you still have the full replay available. And now the last test is running. Firefox already finished. Waiting for Chromium now. All right, that's also done. So if you need to go back in time, you can just move your mouse here. Here you also have all the selectors being called. You have a console here with logging if you want to debug. I'm going to close this and show you the report. So if you run headless or without the UI, this report opens automatically after each one. But because I use the UI right now, I have to manually start it. So we can look at the first test here that failed. You can see all the steps here as well. What I like about this report is that it shows you in each step that you open the exact code that was being executed. So that's really useful for debugging. And then what if there was a run in the in a pipeline and you didn't see it, besides saving the videos of the run and the screenshots, you can also save the trace file. So I did this already in preparation. So I had a previous run for which I saved the trace. And with a simple command, you can open that trace file. And that opens up that UI again. So you can go and watch it, the replay. You have your steps here on the left. So that's also great for debugging. And then there's one more thing I promised to show was a code gen tool. So that's used for getting selectors very quickly. So you have to give it a parameter, so the URL you want to visit, it will open it up. And then you can do some interactions, like I'm going to enter a first name, enter a surname. And while I'm doing this, it's recording everything I just did in this window right here. And as you can see, it's not only giving me the selectors, but also all the actions that I did. Now, working with page objects, of course, that means you'll have to do a little bit of a translation to fit it into your framework, but it's nice to already have these selectors ready for you. And that will conclude my demo.
All right.
So in conclusion, both tests are pretty good. They both have some serious advantages, especially compared to older tools that some of us work with, like Selenium. You have a lot more hassle, a lot more setup, a lot more control, but also a lot more chance of doing something wrong. They each have their own advantages, disadvantages that are unique to each tool. But the advantages are definitely there. How well the tool you use will work depends also on the structure you build inside of it, like you saw, those page objects, util classes, download folders, and as well, of course, the skill set of the engineers that's going to be working on it. And that should also be a deciding factor in which tool you go for. But don't get stuck in just choosing a tool and forcing it to work or trying to make it work if it's not good for that. So look at your project, look at whatever tool you're going to use, what it needs to be able to do, and factor that into your decision. And of course, as always, before just jumping in headlong, make a proof of concept, test the tool, check that it actually does what it promises to do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Are there any questions that have popped up? So test automation projects tend to get messy over time, especially regarding maintenance. What would you suggest as an approach or best practice for Cypress or Playwright to keep everything maintainable? So yeah,
definitely the page objects.
Yeah, page objects.
If you don't have page objects and you're defining selectors within tests, imagine there's a specific element that is being used in 100 tests, and a developer decides he's going to change the ID of that element, then 100 tests break, and you need to start adjusting in 100 files. Well, if it's in a page object and its selector is defined in that single location, all it takes is just changing one line of code.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, next question.
Why the explicit wait has been used in the code since await is Playwright does that.
If I'm not purely using commands from Playwright, so I have a framework around it.
It's for Cypress and Playwright. How is the use of TypeScript? Yes, in Cypress, it's mainly used with TypeScript or JavaScript. So both of these languages can be used for Cypress.
Yeah, for Playwright, you can use both interchangeably. And what also nice, at least in my opinion, is that Playwright hides the JS files, so you don't have to worry with that.
Yeah, that's not in Cypress, it doesn't hide it. This one is for Playwright as well.
Yeah. The mobile automation is mainly for browser on mobile still. There are a few things like geolocation that are supported to emulate some cases, but it's not full mobile emulation yet.
How well do both tools integrate with the CI/CD pipeline? Yes, it can be easily implemented with, for example, Jenkins to run tests from Cypress, and you can also use it with the Cypress cloud as well, because then you have a very clear insight in Cypress cloud of your tests that has been run.
For Playwright, also easy to use in CI/CD. Out of the box, it even has support for browser stack in the configuration. And in my experience, yeah, the tests in CI/CD run as stable most of the time, I have to say, as running it locally.
Yeah, same.
It's not just a video. So when you open up the trace file, you get the same view and logging as that you would if you're running the test live in the UI. So I find it actually more useful to save it than a video.
So in Cypress, you cannot put a breakpoint on a test to stop the test at that point. But like mentioned before, you can see each step in the timeline. So when it fails, it actually stops when you running it locally, and then you can see the screenshot and the previous step as well before it failed.
For Playwright, to be honest, I've never even tried to put a breakpoint. For me, it's good enough that I can see the exact code that failed in the reports. That usually just leads me to the correct location to fix it.
So no, it does not support it. So if you click a button that opens a new tab within the same domain, it will remain on the page that has been working on. So it will not switch over to the new tab, and it's also not easy to actually switch to the new tab with Cypress. Yes, for the Cypress Cloud, for the paid version, it really depends on your project with pricing. Mostly it's because of how many tests will you run in a year. It will depend on what license you have, how many users you have. So it really depends on your needs.
That's going to be one for you, Livio, maybe, because I've never set up Cucumber Respectful with Playwright, so I cannot give an honest answer on how easy it would be or how hard.
Yeah, for Cypress, again, it's the same. I've never set it up with that. So I usually just use Cypress and tests within. Yeah, we will look that up and come back to you with that.
You can see the UI while running the test in Playwright, as you can in Cypress. So you can see it in both tools.
Yeah, as we shown in the demo, I think.
Yeah, I believe the question was asked before the demo.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a bit more difficult to use API testing in Cypress, but it is possible.
Yeah, I've done it in Playwright. That's more down to how you build your framework for supporting API testing as well. So you can have API calls, complete those, and then go back to doing Playwright commands. Yeah.
Exactly. In the previous projects as well that I've used is to use those API or REST calls to set up the beginning of the test setup before the actual Cypress tests.
Okay, so I think that concludes the questions part. It leaves me nothing else to say than a big thank you to Christian and Livio. It was really interesting. Thanks for all the answers also on the questions. If you have any other questions later on, you can always contact us and we will be happy to answer them. We will get back to you on the BDD part. Okay, so that's, I want to just quickly show you for the ones who are interested in more of this. We always have all our brown bags on the Academy page. And for future webinars, you can always follow our LinkedIn page where you can see all next sessions and you can subscribe to them. So thank you for joining. Thank you again, Livio and Christian, and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.